904 billion shillings in debt repayments. This, even as the National Treasury is set to increase borrowing to fund the upcoming budget due to an expected decrease in tax collection due to the depressed economic conditions occasioned by the coronavirus pandemic. The National Assembly is now calling on the National Treasury to put in place measures to cut spending and ease reliance on borrowing. Is that a possibility or not? A quick reminder of the question that we have this morning that we'd like you to participate in, and we'd like to find out, what is your expectation of the budget? What is your expectation in this year's budget? The hashtag is KTN Morning Express, or you can also reach us directly, and that's at Trixingado, and I'm at Michael G. Gitonga. KTN Morning Express is the hashtag, and the question is, what are your expectations in this year's budget? And joining me now is an economist, and that's Dr. XN Iraqi, to just look through and give us possibly some of the expectations. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Daktari, this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Gitonga, and good morning, Kenyans.
Right, and we've started off with the National Assembly. They're painting a picture and giving us, as it is and what is expected in terms of borrowing. We do know that the government so far has had a very, very, very healthy appetite for borrowing, and it looks like that might be the way to go for us to cushion the economy. Your thoughts on this, and possibly what needs to be done?
It's not just the government that has a very good appetite for debt. Even us as individuals have very good appetite for debt. And we just need to look at the number of people borrowing through online platforms. So inevitably, because of COVID-19, because of the reduction in tax revenues, I inevitably see a lot of borrowing taking place in the next one financial year. I know people are complaining that the government is borrowing too much, but I don't see the government avoiding borrowing, because if the economy is in a recession as we talk now because of COVID-19, it means that tax revenues will go down. And if tax revenues go down, you have to look for an alternative means of funding the government services, paying wages, paying for development projects. And surprisingly, one of the easiest sources happens to be debt. And it is interesting that even before we knew of COVID-19, the government had raised the debt ceiling to 9 trillion.
9 trillion.
So it seems to have been, I don't know whether somebody foresaw or whether it was a hallucination, but it seems that the government still has some room to borrow more. And I expect it to do that.
Okay, and maybe just to make it very clear, borrowing is not something that is foreign. It's not something that only Kenya does. Most, if not all, governments do borrow in one way or the other. But maybe just to get it very clear that borrowing may not necessarily be the bigger challenge that we're dealing with here, but whether that money is put into the right use.
I have always raised that issue, that it's not just the government but individuals. We all borrow. The governments all over the world borrow. And the question we always ask is, do you put that money into the most prudent use? You want to have highways, you want to develop the airports, the infrastructure, the education system, the health system, and we cannot wait until we save enough money to develop those facilities. So even as individuals, you may not wait for 20 years to save 5 million to build a house. So it is very prudent and makes economic sense for you to borrow. The question in Kenyan mind, the question in Kenyan's lips, the question in everybody's mind is always one: will we put that money into the good use? If debt is put into a good use, I have no objection to us borrowing as a government. I have no objection to individuals borrowing. It makes economic sense.
All right. They say that the best way to tell how things are going to happen, the best way to tell the future, is to look at the past. Looking at how we have utilized our borrowed money previously, what areas do you think that we certainly must make changes?
I think if you look at the last few years since the Jubilee government came into power, they have been on a borrowing spree. I would put the word spree into quotes. And I think it's a political decision that we want to have a good legacy of having improved the productive capacity of this country. And one area that stands out very clear in terms of borrowing is in SGR. A lot of money was borrowed to build SGR. It is now complete. It's being extended to Western Kenya. And people are asking, shall it improve the infrastructure of this country? So if we can build SGR, if we can build the Thika superhighway, if we can now focus from the hard things to soft things, because in the past, most of the borrowing has focused on hard things, the railway, the superhighway. Now let's focus on the soft things like education, the healthcare, because the economic growth of our country is about the hard things and soft things. So from the past, I think we have seen the hard things. It's a high time now we focus on the soft issues.
All right, and now what are some of those soft issues? When we talk about soft issues, what exactly do you mean?
I have in mind, if you look at Kenya as we talk now, the schools are closed. And we don't know when they are going to be closed. It has been suggested by the president that schools should be opening in September. But have we expanded schools to make sure that there will be social distancing? Now that we have the problem of COVID-19, have we expanded our hospitals to take care of the rising upsurge in cases? So those are the soft issues I'm talking about. And the third one, which I think the government has focused a lot, is on the disadvantaged Kenyans. I was very impressed to find that nowadays people who are over 70, people who are disabled, are getting a check through their M-Pesa. And that is helping them ride through COVID-19. Those are the welfare issues I'm referring to, beyond the big projects like SGR and the superhighways.
All right, and there's also government expenditure. At what point? I mean, if you've so far compared government and our personal ways of living life, and maybe let me use the same example and say, when we earn less, we certainly spend less. We are forced to make changes in our own lives, maybe move to smaller houses, not have some of those luxuries that we may have had when we were gaining more. What areas does government need to do that to ensure that they are also not just borrowing to spend, but borrowing to also save or put it towards development projects that are likely to get us out of this hole?
COVID-19 has solved some of those problems for the government. If you look at the budget every year, there's a very big chunk that goes to travel. Now with COVID-19, nobody's traveling. So we want that budget saved from traveling and maybe hospitality to be moved to more critical areas of the economy. For example, health and education. So I think areas like traveling can be curtailed. There's also a lot of duplication of jobs or work that can be harmonized between the national government and the central government. So those are some of the areas that I can think of that we can focus on so that we live within our means.
Okay. One of the other areas, of course, that we know government gets a large amount of their money is taxes. That has been lowered, and with COVID-19, of course, there's been quite a huge ripple effect. One, the lowering of the taxes. Two, we also have very low-income companies shutting down, people losing jobs, and of course, that's going to affect the government's income adversely. How does that? How do we expect that to impact the budget, and what the CS for Treasury is likely to put on the table as solutions?
I think we should go back to where we began. If the economy is in a recession because of COVID-19, a lot of tax get lost. When people lose jobs, they don't pay income tax. When a business collapses, they don't pay licenses to county governments and so on. So the moment the economy is in such a state, then you find a lot of tax revenues disappearing. And that's why the government is moving towards taxation, not taxation, but borrowing money. Because if you can't get money from tax, you have to get another source. Another way we can probably go through this, which I think would be very prudent, would be to start renegotiating with our debtors, the people who gave us money. Can we renegotiate our payment terms? Can we extend it? So that instead of paying that principal and that interest today, we can pay it maybe after COVID has run its course or has been put under control. So we have a lot of ways we can deal with reduction in tax because of this COVID problem.
Okay, and hopefully that's going to happen. We also have maybe creative ways. What creative ways can we come up with as a country to ensure that we also get, more inputs? We seem to be more of a consumer country than a producer country, yet we have so much resource. Are there ways that we can creatively look as a country as exporting more so that we have more forex coming into the country?
Traditionally, if you look at the history of this country, we have always been very good in exporting raw materials, raw coffee, raw tea, raw soda ash, and so on. Maybe it's the time we started thinking of value addition, so that instead of selling coffee as it is, we process it and sell it. Instead of selling raw tea, we process it, we brand it, and sell it. Instead of exporting raw hides, we can process it into very good hard bags or other very high quality goods. So that's a need, that's a low-lying fruit. We start value addition because we have a lot of resources in this country. But if we don't value addition them, then we get very retro money from exports. And that should be across the economy. Whichever part of the economy, whether it is minerals, whether it is coffee, whether it is tea, whether it is fish, we need to do some value addition so that we get more value for our money.
Well, what do you think stops us from doing that? Because really, I mean, from any, even from a farmer who is, you know, planting basic things, they know that if they did value addition, they're likely to earn more, but maybe may be limited because of the capital required. As a country, what is it that stops us from value add? Why do we have to export coffee so that we import it back when it's already, you know, been processed? Yet it is our own product. We'll definitely be making more. What is it, do you think, that stops us from doing that?
I think I would want to talk like President Donald Trump. We need to be more patriotic. See, one of the reasons why we like imports over exports, we like imports over our own products, is because we feel they are superior. And I'll give you a good example, something as basic as the clothes that we wear. Some people say they prefer to buy mitumbas because they are higher quality. We import a lot of items because we think they are higher quality, and they are always associated with prestige. So if we can be more patriotic, we buy what is made in Kenya, then that problem is going to end. But the other question you must raise, and this is very important, if you have to buy Kenyan goods and get Kenyan services, are they of high quality? Because people want to get value for their money. We get some very cheap imports from other countries, and after 2-3 days, you throw it away. But people don't complain because they feel, I bought it at a very low price. So if you want Kenyans to consume goods made locally or export Kenyan goods, they must be of high quality.
Okay, so we'll have to work on our quality for us to consume our own.
And
although
it's
sort of catch-22 because there are those who feel that the reason why they cannot, you know, make them high quality is because maybe the cost of making them becomes so high such that the mitumbas that you're talking about end up being better quality, yet they're cheaper. For instance, even if we took fish from China right now is cheaper than fish from Lake Victoria.
I think we need to not just look at the end product, but the whole supply chain. If you are getting fish from Kisumu to Nairobi, what is the cost of transport? What is the cost of processing? So the reason why some of our products end up getting very expensive is because of things like transport. Is our transport system good enough? Is our labor too high or too low? So we don't look at the end products only, but how you produce it. Are we efficient enough? So if we become more efficient, we should be able to compete with any factory or any producer in the world.
Okay, and hopefully we can do that. All right, let's also look at the politics of the nation. I mean, right now we are in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic, yet we also have another huge budget that we may be paying for as coffers for you know, the Building Bridges initiative. At what point does politics, if at all it's possible, take a back seat for us to, first of all, get the country back on track, so to speak, economically speaking? Then we can go back to the politics of days. There are those who say the two of them are synonymous, so I don't know if it's possible to separate them.
I don't think you can separate politics and economy. They always go together. In fact, when you look at the history of this country over the last 50 years or so, you'll discover that there's a very high correlation between economic growth and politics. For example, anytime we go to the polls, the economy takes a nosedive. After that, it goes up. So you cannot separate economics and politics. In fact, one of the things that is surprising me is the high octane politics as COVID ravages the country. But that should not be very surprising to a good political observer, because politicians are very good at taking advantage of adversities. You are more likely to push your political agenda when people are in such a state of mind, state of flux like now, than when people are very peaceful. Remember, when the economy is doing very well, people are settled, people are more confident. But when there's fear like now, COVID-19, then people are not very settled, and whatever political agenda you take to them, they're more likely to be more receptive. So it's a very strategic move for politicians, But from an individual perspective, it might not make a lot of sense. But to politics and politicians, it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. All right, Dr. Exen Iraqi, we're going to take a short break, but we continue with this discussion on the budget as we focus